very busy the whole day.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was with him this morning for one as well, so that was run from Brussels.
Brussels, yeah, no, difference.
Okay, so I think we can get started. Thank you all for joining us for this webinar hosted by Tehreek-e-Kashmir. Most importantly, thank you Fahim for hosting this. As always, he's connecting us to MPs, keeping them informed. Today, obviously, is Black Day, 27th of October. It's quite a key day for Kashmir. It's actually kind of one of the key events to the Kashmir conflict. It's the day when Kashmir was illegally occupied by Indian forces. Before the 27th of October, many events already unfolded, like the Jammu massacre and many other things were taking place. But this day in particular was a day that solidified sort of Indian occupation in Kashmir. So today we're going to talk about some of the history, some of the issues associated with it, and some of the solutions as well. I'm going to now hand it over to Fahim. I think he wants to say a few words. And then once we've spoken to Fahim, then I want to move on to His Excellency, and then we'll have speakers coming along. So Fahim, if you would like to start, please.
Thank you very much, Uzma Rasool. First of all, I would like to welcome His Excellency Sardar Masood Khan, President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, British MPs, leadership from Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and everyone. Thank for your participation in this Kashmir conference. 73 years ago, India illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir on 27th October 1947. Kashmiris across the world are observing this day as a Black Day. The Kashmir crisis was one of the first issues brought to the UN in 1948. It has been 72 years since the Kashmir dispute was first debated there, but a solution has yet to be reached. Kashmir has been under Indian siege since 5th August 2019 after abrogating Article 370 and 35A. Kashmiris have been systematically, economically destroyed. The United Nations should put pressure on India to allow access for international relief agencies into Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. I believe that we in the United Kingdom have an obligation and opportunity to stand for justice, provide support to victims, and ensure the voice of the oppressed people of Kashmir is heard. Thank you very much, Uzma.
Okay, we now have Your Excellency, President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, Sardar Masood Khan, who will give us a speech.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Thank you so much. So, good evening. It must be evening there, or it's 5 o'clock there, a few minutes past 5 o'clock. So, my greetings from Azad Jammu and Kashmir to all of you. First, I want to pay tribute to Mr. Fahim Kayani, who's been the leading light of the Kashmir movement and Tehreek-e-Kashmir. And he, just before this webinar started, he was telling people that Tehreek-e-Kashmir has organized successful 25 demonstrations all around Europe. So this is a great achievement. And it's good to see Uzma Rasool and these distinguished parliamentarians from across the political spectrum. They're all supporters of Kashmir. They are powerful voices in support of Kashmir. So I'm so pleased to see all these influential MPs, some of them in leadership positions, assembled here today. And yes, I learned quite a few things from Mr. Benion, who was a fellow participant in one of the earlier seminars. Mr. Fahim Kayani has bound me to stick to the 10-minute limit, and I promised to do that, and I'd like to make good on that promise. So let me be very brief. And first, I would say why we call this day the Black Day. On this day, October the 27th, 1947, the Indian occupation forces landed in Srinagar, and they occupied the territory, and they started brutalizing the people of Jammu and Kashmir. It was on their watch that the Jammu massacre or Jammu Genocide took place in the month of November. Of course, they were assisted by the Dogra army of the Maharaja of Kashmir. Also, the Indian National Army, and this was a separate outfit, Indian National Army, and also Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh operatives. Now, they collaborated and orchestrated a massacre, and this massacre was swept under the carpet. 250,000 people died in that massacre, and 27,000 women were killed. And ever since, this relentless killing spree has been continuing in Kashmir up to this day, and some 500,000 people have been killed. In fact, when the occupiers moved into the territory, they disenfranchised the people, and those people in the territory remain disenfranchised up to this day. So this is one of the biggest tragedies of our times. Despite the creation of the United Nations, despite the focus of the United Nations on the Kashmir dispute, there have been no solutions, and Kashmiri's suffering has been increasing every day, every year, and for decades. Now, I'm grateful to the United Kingdom. I've been visiting the United Kingdom after assuming presidency. The most frequently visited destination for me has been the United Kingdom, abroad, of course. And what I saw there was this cross-party consensus in the form of APPKG, All Parties Parliamentary Kashmir Group, for the realization of the right to self-determination of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. The group and the MPs who participated in the deliberations, they never minced their words, and they supported the Kashmiris' right to self-determination, their right to make their political decisions. Recently, we saw establishment of the Conservative Friends of Kashmir, and this is a very, very vocal group, and we have Labour Friends of Kashmir group. Other parties like Liberal Democrats and SNP, they have also been very, very articulate on Kashmir. So thank you so much, United Kingdom, for what you've been doing, for shining a light on the plight of the Kashmiris. I would also pay tribute to the diaspora community who have done a marvelous job in mobilizing and galvanizing support for the Kashmiris. You know, because of the colonization and occupation of the territory, life for the people of Jammu and Kashmir has been held. Since August the 5th last year, the Indian occupation authorities moved occupation and colonization to a higher level, because now they have annexed the territory. They have completely excluded the people of Jammu and Kashmir from decision making about their own fate. They are people without a voice. They do not have any political persona. In fact, there are two outsiders. One is called Manoj Sinha, who is the Lieutenant Governor. There's our Chief Secretary, who is Subramaniam. They come from outside. They take decisions on behalf of the people of Jammu and Kashmir, and a dictation is given by New Delhi. So this is a captive territory. And that's not all. Killings and blindings and disappearances have been accelerated. Women are fetishized and objectified, and they are frequent victims of rape and sexual molestation because their humiliation or their rape is used as an instrument of war. There's a genocide taking place in Kashmir right now. I have said in earlier webinars that I can't use softer synonyms and substitutes for genocide. This is what it is. Let's call a spade a spade. And there are concentration camps in Kashmir, which have been set up on the model of the Nazi concentration camps, where 14,000 young men are being tortured. It includes that this entire prisoner population includes children as young as 10, 11, and 12. A vicious exercise of population substitution has been undertaken by the occupying authorities, and in order to change the demography, when the occupation forces could not win the hearts and minds of the people of Jammu and Kashmir for the past 73 years, they have come up with a new formula, and the formula is change the people, change the nation, change the population, or change its composition. These are what they're doing there, what the occupation forces, driven by Hindutva, this reincarnation of fascism in the religious form, what they're doing can be properly called genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and ethnic cleansing. And all these crimes have been listed by international law, the Geneva Conventions, also international humanitarian law, Security Council resolutions, and there are severe punishments for these crimes. Similar crimes were punished during the Nuremberg trials by the Nuremberg tribunals, but there are no tribunals for these genocidaires. In fact, the world is busy, the powerful part of the world is busy appeasing these genocidaires. And in fact, I mean, their image is glorified. It is purged of violence that they perpetrate every day against unarmed civilians in Kashmir. And the world is also complicit in peddling this false myth that India is fighting terrorism in Kashmir. There is no terrorism in Kashmir. There are 900,000 troops waging a war against the people of Jammu and Kashmir. And according to their own figures, they are fighting 230 militants, out of which they have already eliminated 180. So these numbers do not make sense. They are, in fact, at war with the population of Kashmir. What they have done in the recent past, as I said, that they have issued these new domicile certificates to 1.9 million people in the past 3 months. And they want to increase this number. Who are these people to whom these domicile certificates are being issued? They are Hindus from all over India, and they are being imported and settled illegally in the occupied territory to change the demography. The Indian objective is to increase the number of these new citizens of Jammu and Kashmir to about 5 to 6 million in a period of 2 years. Let me come to the operative part. I'm making some suggestions. So, in fact, all the participants of this seminar are familiar with the facts, and they've been updated from time to time, and they themselves have keen interest in the developments, in these dire, egregious developments in Jammu and Kashmir. Now, my suggestions are that while the parliamentarians have been very vocal in the United Kingdom and in the European Parliament, I mean, the parliamentarians of British origin, the 10 Downing Street has been tight-lipped, and FCO has made only ambiguous and ambivalent statements. They try to balance their relations between India and Pakistan, and in the process, the issue of Jammu and Kashmir disappears from their radar screen. So I think that if you could talk to the FCO and 10 Downing Street to sort of issue some statements which indicate the United Kingdom's interest in the plight and the future of the people of Jammu and Kashmir in one form or the other. Again, I have mentioned in the earlier webinars that the United Kingdom has a special position in the international community. It has a permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council. According to the Charter, as a veto-wielding power, it has a responsibility to work towards maintenance of international peace and security, and peace and security in the region is being disrupted by India, particularly by brutalizing the people of Jammu and Kashmir. The UK's delegation, permanent delegation in the Security Council, did not object to the 3 debates that were held since August the 5th last year. But I think that the UK could play the part of a peace builder in the United Kingdom and move the Security Council towards the resolution of the Jammu and Kashmir dispute. Some people must be thinking that the UK won't do it, but there is no harm in relaying this message to the UK leadership. I would also say that these have been my frequent talking points, and I want to reiterate them, that I have realized as the president of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, working for the past 4 years, that although we reach out to the world's decision makers, we would not succeed. The Security Council would not budge. India would not change its behavior. So it is important that we should turn the Kashmir movement into an international civil rights movement. And we must attain, or we must escalate this movement to the critical level where it starts building pressure on the Security Council, capitals around the world, and in Delhi to stop genocide in Kashmir. It must also be recognized that Kashmiris are the key party to the dispute. They should not be excluded from any diplomatic process, because there are 3 parties to the dispute: Pakistan, India, and Kashmir, or the people of Jammu and Kashmir. And it is necessary, absence of dialogue or a diplomatic process is a perilous thing, because this situation could lead to a war between the 2 nuclear armed states. So to avert that that kind of apocalypse, I think it's necessary to activate multilateral diplomacy. We have been disappointed by the bilateral processes in the past. I mean, the processes that took place in Delhi or Islamabad, they did not produce results. So this time, the United Nations Secretary General, the Security Council, they should demonstrate leadership and catalyze a diplomatic process involving Kashmiris, Pakistan, and the leadership of India. I think that my final 2 points are that we should broadcast, we should craft and broadcast the true narrative about Kashmir, because India is very powerful all over the world. It has lobby in Brussels and Washington and London and in the United Nations itself. So what it does, what it is doing in these capitals or in these multilateral institutions is to impose a gag order that it has already imposed on the Kashmiris. So the gag order is extended to the international community and to the international forums where decisions are made. Even in the foreign offices, nobody is allowed to speak against Kashmir, against India, because of their economic and strategic interests tied with India. So last point is that it is good to talk to the people who support our cause, and they are a powerful minority across the globe. But this is our base, and this is very important. This is the core group of our support. But we should move beyond and move above preaching to the choir and try to enlist the support of multiple groups who at the moment are disagreeing with us. But if we inform them properly, they would join our ranks, and probably by doing so, we would be able to make an impact. As far as the people of Jammu and Kashmir, you have witnessed that they've been fighting this war for the past 73 years. They haven't capitulated, and their resolve remains strong that we would continue to fight by all means to get our independence, to get our freedom, to get our right to self-determination, and get freedom from the tyranny and terrorism of occupation forces. Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure to talk to you. I don't know whether I kept the promise of speaking to 10 minutes.
You're excellent. You're a little over, but it's okay. I'm gonna pass it on now to Marco Longhi, who is the MP from Dudley North, and he has an excellent collection of flags behind him as well. So Marco, if you could give us your views. Marco, I think you're
You need-
muted. Marco, I think you're muted.
Hi. I apologise for that. IT always seems to have the better of me in these circumstances. Thank you, Your Excellencies, for your words, which are always very sobering when we hear them. And it is very important that these messages do keep being reiterated, and particularly at a time of such intensity in all our governments when we think about COVID and other things afflicting our populations. It can sometimes be the case that we are very much more inward looking, and so the danger there is that we can forget about what is actually happening elsewhere. As speakers, and certainly Your Excellency has mentioned, as heard me say before, the stance that I take is always one of standing up for human rights, and I will stand up for human rights wherever that may be in the world. And I'd like to commend the cross-party work that I know colleagues from across the chamber would want to reiterate and focus their efforts on. I don't know if my words will sound a little bit out of turn here, but in trying to follow from afar, I don't know if perhaps stating that there might be some light at the end of the tunnel is the case. I'm sensing that there might be some opposition parties in India itself that might be starting to question their own government on their stance in Kashmir, and I think that this is a really, really important time and an important thing that this happens. I think I might have seen that Monica Gandhi herself has actually voiced words to that effect, and maybe His Excellency can state whether that's the case or not, but that would be of very great value, I imagine, towards the cause. I have something like 8,000 constituents, the very vast majority of whom come from the Kashmiri region, with friends and family who actually live quite close to the border. So I'm very alive to the problems, and the, perhaps problem isn't quite the right word to use, the terror and lockdown. We talk about lockdown here. What's happening in Kashmir, by all accounts, is far, far worse. So I will continue my efforts with colleagues, as I say, cross-party, and with energy to do what we can from our end to support and prevent human rights abuses in the region. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Marco. That was an excellent contribution. Thank you very much. And also thank you to Your Excellency for your speech earlier. I think I forgot to say thank you for that. I'm now going to go over to Jess Phillips, MP for Birmingham Yardley. Hi, Jess.
Hi, Uzma. Thank you very much for having me. And as always, it is, as has been said, sobering to hear of a worsening and deepening situation. What we have to make sure of is that a sort of lethargy for the fact that it is bad has to lead to some marked action and change. And I was struck by what the President was saying with regard specifically to how we build out our coalition, how we bring more people in to the coalition rather than just singing to the choir, but also about what he was saying about women and the treatment of women. in occupied Kashmir. And I suppose what I would like to come to the table with in regards to some solutions for building coalitions is that there is a big and global coalition around women's rights, of which I work with very, very closely around the world, and I think that maybe working with some other partners to try and tell the story of exactly how rape is being used as a weapon of war, for example, could potentially put some more spotlight back into the situation. And I would certainly like to offer with the President to work to try and do that, to tell some of the stories of the women and seek a sort of global platform. The UN, for example, has the Commission for the Status of Women every year in March. Obviously, no idea whether that will go ahead this year. It was certainly cancelled last year, but the seeking other avenues rather than just the sort of the issue that sits between Pakistan and India to try and make it the world see the human rights, civil rights movement. I think that using the vehicle of Women's Rights Global Coalition may be something that we should look to do, and I will certainly get in touch with the President to do that. And as has already been said, and will be said by every member of Parliament, this issue continues to be of great concern to my constituents. Fahim is in fact one of my constituents, to just give an idea of exactly what bigger concern this is to the people I represent, and so we will continue to fight, and I'm happy to look at ways that we can expand. And I would put the challenge to all members of Parliament on this call, especially those from the governing party, is that we need to hear we need to hear action and plans of action from government ministers as much as we do from backbenchers.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you so much. You've always been a great supporter of Kashmiris, so thank you very much. Now I'm going to call on Stephen Timms, MP for East Ham, so from London.
Thank you, Uzma. I'm very pleased to be able to take part in this call, and I'd like to thank you, Mr. President, for taking this opportunity to brief us and for the update that you've provided. It's just over a year now since I was last in Azad Kashmir. I had the privilege of meeting you in that visit, of going to the border. I looked across the line of control, and so I've got very vivid recollections of what I learned on that visit. What I just wondered was whether you could provide us a bit more information about what's happening inside the other side of the line of control. When the annexation took place in August of last year, there were tens of thousands of additional Indian troops who went into Kashmir. Can you give us an update on what's happening? Have troop numbers been reduced, or have they been kept at the very, very high level they were when the annexation occurred? And what's happened about communications? At the time, there was a very fierce lockdown on communications, both on phone services. I think international phone services certainly stopped, and on the internet. And I wondered whether you could just give us an update on that aspect. Are international phone services anything like back to normal? What's happening about email services in Indian administered Kashmir at the moment? But like other MPs on this call, this matter is one of great concern to many of my constituents. It was they who asked me to take part this afternoon, and I'm pleased to have had the opportunity to do so. But I'd be very grateful for an update on those two specific points if you could let us have one. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm now going to bring on Ghulam Nabi, who is from Indian occupied Kashmir. He's a doctor. So could I have Ghulam Nabi, please?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Greetings. I'd like to first thank Fahim Kayani and then Uzma Rasool, and of course His Excellency the President of Azad Kashmir and the honorable members of the UK Parliament and EU Parliament. Kashmir is going through another darkest day. I'll be very brief because the president has given quite a significant overview of Kashmir. But I want to tell you that the situation looks grim. I left Kashmir in 1974. I've been in the United States for the last 46 years. And right now I'm in the snowy Michigan, but I live in Ohio. I'm a gastroenterologist by profession and have been president of World Kashmir Awareness, working for Kashmir ever since I left. My soul and spirit, obviously, is split between the United States and Kashmir. Kashmiris have always resisted tyranny, but this time it is very different. Not only do Kashmiris live in fear, their lands are said to be sold off by Indian business interests to Hindutva settlers who seek a demographic solution to Kashmir. India hopes that Kashmiris will face the same fate as the West Bank Palestinians currently, or even that of the Aborigines in Australia. They hope to create a future where the Kashmiris are left in Kashmir. Those who are left in Kashmir have few and far between numbers. What is to be done that's where I'm going to go at this time, being a part of the diaspora in the West. Unless we, the Kashmiris worldwide, unite and pressurize the moribund United Nations to find courage to act, unless we shame the international community for their silence, unless we call upon the liberal Leviathan of the European Union, the beacon of democracy, the United States, and the proud Muslim communities of the world, that enough has happened to Kashmiris. This latter-day colonialist project, then there will be no hope for Kashmiris. For the land where our ancestors are buried among the luscious green mountains. It is precisely for this reason that we Kashmiris, especially those in the diaspora, cannot give up our hope. It is up to us to continue the struggle for our people, our liberation, for our people who are colonized. Let's be clear about it. It's not just an occupation. It is it's a colonization of the new type. It is up to us to continue the struggle for our survival. Some of us, many of us, may not be united at this time, but we need to unite to free our land. We must do this work not for ourselves, because we probably won't be able to live up to see our land getting free. We must give this legacy to our culture and tradition, the strength of our beliefs and values, and the knowledge that we fought for our collective vision, our united dream of a truly free and peaceful Kashmir. October 27th will always remain a dark day for every Kashmiri. Let us remember everything that has been lost. Let us also never forget that in the midst of this darkness, there is always a strand of light. Let our voices be that which shine the light of justice and to end the darkness of Kashmir. We Kashmiris who are living outside, we cannot give up. We know in Kashmir, only within 1 year, we were able to shame the Indian government here, the Hindutva government. And hopefully, if we continue, we have multiple organizations in the United States. Some are very old organizations, some are very new. And we are going to be able to struggle so that someday our children, grandchildren overseas, our nephews and nieces, they'll get the freedom. And I'd like to thank you again because time is short and other friends have to weigh in. Thank you again. God bless. Thank you.
Thank you, Ghulam. Can I now get Andrew Gwynne, MP for Denton and Reddish? Andrew is also Chair of Labour Friends of Kashmir. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. President, for your contribution at the start of this conference. It's my pleasure to speak at this event because, I feel it's a really important thing to mark the 73rd anniversary of the occupation of Kashmir. 73 years of a divided territory, 73 years of the international community, at best paying lip service and at worst turning a blind eye to the abuses of human rights and to the deprival of the people of Kashmir, to have that most basic and the most fundamental of all human rights, and that is to be able to choose by whom you are governed and how you are governed. And all of the things flow from that: the right to family life, the right to religious freedom, the right to education, the right to healthcare, all flows from that right to decide by whom you are governed and how you are governed. And for more than 7 decades, that has been deprived the people of Kashmir, as was promised, not just in the Independence of India Act, but also in subsequent United Nations resolutions. And so I think it is time for the international community and for us in the United Kingdom to retell the story of Kashmir, of what happened 73 years ago and all the dreadful things that have happened in the decades since, and to remind people that this isn't an historic injustice. It is still continuing to this day, with the ongoing abuses of people in Indian occupied Kashmir, of the deprival of basic human rights, of the terrible abuses towards humanity that are taking place there, and of the story of the lockdown. Whilst the rest of the world is in lockdown because of coronavirus, the people of Kashmir on the Indian side of the line of control have the experience of a much more brutal lockdown through occupation. And so we need to tell that story so that we can demand changes at the international level. And I pledge to do what I can as the chair of Labour Friends of Kashmir, working with my colleagues, not just in the Labour Party, but through the all-party parliamentary group, across party, to tell this story in the British Parliament, to be the voice of the oppressed in the British Parliament, and to try and convince our government to use their connections on the international stage, whether that's the Commonwealth or the United Nations, to be able to try to broker communications as the start of the process to bring peace and human rights back to the people of Kashmir. Because I do believe that this is a situation that can be resolved. It takes commitment. It takes the international community to want to bring India, Pakistan, the Kashmiri people, because no decision can be made about Kashmir without the Kashmiri people at the table, into a discussion, and from that to try and get a peaceful resolution after 7 decades to this injustice. It can be done. Nobody's pretending it's easy. Nobody's pretending that there won't be bumps along the way, and that there won't be intransigence along the way. There won't be difficulties along the way. But if we hold firm as an international community, and if we provide the voice for the oppressed, I believe that we can set in motion the dynamics that we can one day see this injustice righted. And that is something that I will do my bit to work towards. That's my pledge to you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrew. You're doing great work for Labour Friends of Kashmir. Your commitment to the issue has been amazing. Thank you very much. Can I now get James Daly MP, who is from Bury North?
Hello, can you hear me, first of all, most importantly? I am actually the joint chair of the Conservative Friends of Kashmir. And each time I take part in a call like this with the President, it seems about 10 years ago when I was sat with him in the his presidential residence in Muzaffarabad at the end of February of this year and the beginning of March. And I think to take one of the things when you become an elected MP with a large Kashmiri diaspora is you learn, and it's a learning experience regarding the history and the experiences of the people there, but nothing from my own personal experience has come close to going to Kashmir, to Pakistan, a beautiful country full of beautiful people. We were welcomed fantastically. And he gave me the opportunity to speak together with other MPs. It was a cross-party visit, the all-party parliamentary group with Labour colleagues, Liberal Democrat colleagues. And we spoke to the Pakistan government, the Prime Minister, the Azad Kashmir government, the Prime Minister, to the United Nations, to the army, went to the line of control. We spoke, most importantly, to the people who've been affected by this. We went to a refugee camp in Kotli and spoke to people who had actually left Jammu Kashmir to come over the border because of the human rights abuses. Now, I'm a lawyer, and separate to the things that the President has said and other people have identified, I think some of the basics of a functioning legal framework which gives people the rights to live in peace, that are the basis of those human rights that we all support and and the freedoms that we all have in this country, are not there. And those basic things are things that I think we should all fight for, the universal freedoms. If you are in Jammu and Kashmir, you can be arrested for 2 years under house arrest, not charged, released a day before the 2 years comes up, and then given another 2 years detention. People are taken from their homes. There is no functioning legal system to protect rights. And that is just one of the many issues that face the region. The President has explained the situation clearly. We have 2 nuclear powers here. This should be the #1 issue at the top of the international agenda, separate to the issue regarding what is happening within Kashmir. The threat of nuclear war between India and Pakistan is something that should actually, how it is not discussed at the United Nations publicly on a near daily basis is one of the great mysteries of foreign policy. But again, in the UK, we see a lot of foreign reports from various countries regarding human rights abuses and human rights issues. We very rarely see any reports at all informing the general population in our country about this issue. And I very much support what Andrew says. I very much support what all colleagues say, that this is an issue which transcends politics. It's an issue of universal human rights. I always think that we spend a lot of time in the British Parliament talking about rights of self-determination. Our colleagues from the Scottish National Party spend their whole time in the British Parliament talking about that. But we have a situation here going back to the late 1940s where United Nations resolutions were in place outlining the process for self-determination for the Kashmiri people. And it seems an odd thing to me that as a Conservative politician who was supportive of a referendum in the UK regarding our continued membership or not of the European Union, that we wouldn't support a legal framework which gives the Kashmiri people the choice to be governed and to have the freedoms that we all have in this country. So I am not going to tell the people on this call everything they know about the history, about the anniversary. All that I can say is that the way forward, I believe, for British parliamentarians is, yes, I as a government backbencher will continue to lobby and speak to government ministers to do exactly what the President said regarding the influence we have at the United Nations for our permanent seat. But it also is important, I think, that people like myself and Andrew and Stephen and Jess and Marco, we've already heard, stand together on this issue. Because if we can't support each other on what are the fundamentals of people's human rights, not to be brutalised, not to be attacked, not to have the opportunity to live and to choose how you want to live your life, then that is something that we should all be, I think, deeply ashamed of if we can't do that. But we can do that. We recognise that. And that is how we are going to take this forward. And we're going to do as much publicity as we can, hopefully, through the APPG, as many debates as possible within the parliamentary spectrum, and as much lobbying as we can. And in all honesty, that's what we can do on a practical level as parliamentarians. But as ever, thank you very much for inviting me on this. Thank you very much for allowing us all the opportunity to speak about a very, very important issue that should be at the forefront of foreign policy, as I say, for all world leaders. So thank you.
Thank you very much, James. I'm now going to bring on Philip Benion. Before that, I'd also like to congratulate James Daly on the excellent relaunch of Conservative Friends of Kashmir. It's been great to see a lot of MPs joining and supporting the cause. So thank you very much for all your efforts with that. So now I've got Philip Benion. He is former MEP for West Midlands region.
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, I'd just like to say that we have actually relaunched the Lib Dem Friends of Kashmir too, about 6 months ago. So far, it's only got as far as a WhatsApp group, but it does now exist. Firstly, I really want to say that in the short to medium term, I have to say I'm not particularly optimistic about making some decent progress on the Kashmiri issue and getting any restoration of the autonomy that was grasped away from them from the Kashmiris last year. The reason for this, I think, is that we have seen a democracy and human rights are struggling worldwide. There was a piece in a leader in The Economist last week raising this very, very issue. I think governments over the last 20 years in the liberal democracies have become more and more transactional. Of course, that has been sort of peaked by the election of Trump 4 years ago in America, where they have in the past been the leader in terms of the liberal democracies in the world in taking on and putting pressure on tyrannical behaviour elsewhere. Now, we really have to re-establish this before we're going to make a huge amount of progress. Now, in the longer term, I'm optimistic because even that leader in The Economist last week actually indicates that we are at least starting to think about this and start to understand that we have been failing to stick up for our values. Not just the British government, the EU, all of the governments, all of the liberal democracies around the world have basically retreated. And I think it's not just been the politicians, it's been their electorates too. We've seen that the electorates have lost contact with the connection between somebody's human rights in somewhere like Kashmir actually being important for the defence of their own human rights in the long term. And the world has been becoming increasingly transactional. But I think that it has we've reached the bottom in terms of this trend. Certainly in the European Parliament last year, we saw evidence of a turnaround in this process, particularly over Kashmir, and over Xinjiang with China, and over Hong Kong. We suddenly found that we were getting a much stronger line, and it was very, very much pushed from the UK, and with an absolute cross-party grouping. Just look at what we debated on Kashmir and also on the Indian Citizens Amendment Act. We had not only myself and Shafak Mohammed from the Lib Dems, we've had John Howarth from Labour, Anthea McIntyre from the Conservatives, Scott Ainsley from the Greens, all on the same side, and the same with Xinjiang with China. I know that we're not there anymore, and we've lost our pulpit, if you like, in putting this forward. But I think we made a permanent change there, and there are MEPs still there from the other member states who can take our line forward. So I think in the longer term, and I'm not suggesting for a moment that Britain outside of the EU will lose its focus on human rights. I think we can still do that, whether we're inside or outside. And it's up to our governments now to hold India, hold China to account for their human rights abuses. And it's only when we get to that situation where we can actually say, where we can actually have the leverage to make progress. Because if we're actually willing to threaten India with sanctions, if we're actually willing to actually put pressure on India, then we can actually hope for change. If we're not even willing to do that, and if we're saying, well, trade's trade, we can't afford to upset India because it'll cost us money, it'll cost us jobs, then we're doomed. We have actually got to start standing up for our values. And when we in the West, when the liberal democracies start standing up for our values, then the hope is that we can actually make some progress. I know that this thing's been going on a lot longer than the last 20 or 30 years, but it's got worse. And my view is that Modi has upped the ante. He's removed the autonomy, and he's trying this population movement entirely because he thinks he can get away with it, and entirely because we've had this retreat from democracy and human rights. He's also, I think, responds to what Xi Jinping in China responds to. We've seen Xi Jinping locking up the Uyghur population in Xinjiang. Now, why then can't Modi do exactly the same sort of thing in Kashmir? And that's the way these people think. We have got to take them on. We have got to defend human rights and democracy worldwide. And when we start doing that, then we can actually turn the tide. And hopefully a good election result in the United States next week will actually start that process. It's certainly not going to be immediate. Bringing the Americans back into a multilateral framework as full and active members of the world community is going to take a little time. But allied to that, if we can get a little bit of reform at the United Nations, certainly with the Human Rights Council, where I get to speak on from time to time for Liberal International, where I'm the Vice Chair of Human Rights. We're very, very worried that the Human Rights Council, the elections to the Human Rights Council now, we tend to find that all of the worst human rights abusers in the world, China, whether it's Venezuela, whether it's Saudi Arabia, are up there trying to get onto the Human Rights Council. So we need some reform in the United Nations. But the General Assembly, if we can get the General Assembly on side, if Britain can use its voice in the Security Council, then hopefully we can start moving in the right direction. So in the long term, yeah, I think let's be optimistic. But if we're not willing to defend our values, then I think that optimism is misplaced. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Phil. I think that was an excellent analysis of not just obviously what we can do, but the wider context, geopolitical context of human rights and what's going on and why it's becoming more difficult. I think that was an excellent analysis there. I'm now going to bring on Liam Byrne, who is another Birmingham MP. He is for Birmingham Hodge Hill. Birmingham, I think, is like the second home of Kashmir in the UK. I'm a Londoner myself, and in London, there's not many of us. But I think Birmingham is like the second home for a lot of Kashmiris. So thank you, Liam, for joining us today.
Uzma, thanks so much. Not just Birmingham, but Hodge Hill, my constituency in particular. Mr. President, friends, it's a great pleasure to join you, and really there's not much for me to add at this late stage in the discussion, and so really I just wanted to underline 3 points. First, my profound thanks to you, sir, and to Fahim and the team for bringing us together and for keeping us together at the moment when so much is going on, when we are losing so many of our neighbours to COVID, when we are supporting so many of our friends and colleagues through the deep distress of the economic shock which is hitting us. It's sometimes easy to lose track and to lose sight of important crises in which we all have a stake. And through Fahim's work and through the work of this organization, we don't run that risk because we are organized properly. And in politics, we know that organization is actually everything. The second point I wanted to make really just builds on what Phil Benion has just said, which is that in politics, I guess we've all learned to seize our moment when those moments come. And one of those moments is coming in a few days' time. If President Biden wins the American election, that is going to change the political atmosphere around the world. In particular, it is going to reduce the space, it's going to reduce the energy, it's going to reduce the appeal of the kind of populism, the kind of othering of people that has been the leitmotif, the political philosophy of Mr. Modi. And I think that many of us hope that Mr. Biden's victory could well be the moment the tide against populism begins to turn. And closing down the airspace for the kind of political strategies that we've seen the BJP unfortunately prosecute is an important change in the political weather. And we therefore have to think strategically and quickly about where and how we push the case for change, because in due course, in the first quarter of next year, President Biden's national security team will be up and running, his foreign policy team will be up and running, his team at the United Nations will be up and running. And as a man of Irish heritage, you know, Mr. Biden understands the peacemaking business better than others. I hope that he seizes the opportunity to push forward something that I've called for a long time, which is the involvement of third parties in brokering a peaceful solution to what has hitherto proved an intractable dispute between two sovereign powers. So that is, you know, is my kind of moment for optimism. The third point I want to mention really is just some of the framework for the argument. I mean, we all need arguments to rest on. As some of you know, I am the chair of the Global Parliamentary Network on the World Bank and the IMF, and we have our annual meetings in Washington once a year. They were online this year. But I was very struck in publishing, we brought together a book from the Parliamentary Network for our meetings this year. I was very struck about the way in which parliamentarians around the world want to hold on to a rights-based approach to progress. In particular, people want to hold on to the framework enshrined in the Sustainable Development Goals. People know that the ascent to achieving those goals has just gotten an awful lot steeper. But nonetheless, that does not appear to be diminishing parliamentarians' appetite to use a rights-based framework as the constellation to steer by. Now, I think that's important because I think it allows us to build consensus, because frankly, the Sustainable Development Goals are not goals which should be achieved in one particular part of the world. They are the rights of all citizens, including the residents of Kashmir. And therefore, if we are serious about pushing ahead with the SDG agenda on which parliamentarians around the world appear to agree, and if we are to take and exploit perhaps the opportunity created by the American elections, then there could well be some initiatives that we can push forward around this agenda in the first quarter to the first half of this year. So look, my thanks again for everybody being brought together in this way for these constructive talks. These talks are important because they allow us to continue to take stock, to continue to survey the political landscape, and continue to pledge, as I pledge to you today, that we will not let this cause be forgotten. We will continue our pursuit of this cause until we have justice for the people of Kashmir.
Thank you very much, Liam. Kate Hollern MP for Blackburn wanted to join us today, but she's having a few technical issues. So she sends her apologies and would try and join us next time. Now I'm going to bring on someone from Indian occupied Kashmir, a native resident who has actually lost 22 family members to Indian occupation forces. So he's someone who really truly kind of understands the situation there. So can I please have Altaf Ahmed Bhat, if you're there?
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
Thank you, Uzma. Assalamu alaikum and good evening and greetings to everyone. First of all, on this occasion today, I would like to extend my gratitude to our young, energetic and dedicated ambassador of Kashmir, I mean President of Tehreek-e-Kashmir UK, Mr. Fahim Kayani, for keeping the Kashmir freedom movement alive internationally despite of this COVID-19 by introducing Kashmir virtual conferences. He is the founder of these virtual conferences. I salute to him. I am also very, very thankful and grateful to the President of State of Jammu and Kashmir, Mr. Masood Ahmed Khan, for his continuous contribution to raise the voice of deceased people of Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir on international forums. Also, I appreciate and thank respected MPs, Member of Parliament of United Kingdom, and other civil society members for their continuous support and for sharing their precious time to raise Kashmir issue virtually and with us at House of Commons, at Geneva and other forums around the world. My dear friends of Kashmir, you all are known as friends of Kashmir in our hearts, in Indian occupied Kashmir, in Pakistan, in Azad Jammu and Kashmir. Everyone from you know. 27th October 1947 is the darkest day in our history, in the history of Jammu and Kashmir. 73 years passed, millions of Kashmiris gave their lives, thousands of women molested and raped, children orphaned, but Kashmiris never, we never stepped back from the demand of freedom and right to self-determination, which was promised to us by the United Nations at the table of United Nations by which has been agreed by Government of India, Government of Pakistan. Dear friends, Kashmiris are humans without human rights. Everyone knows. They have been denied the basic human rights which are protected by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Over the decades since 1947, India used tactics to subdue and enslave Kashmiris, but the commitment of brave Kashmiri people for the freedom after 73 years is a slap on the face of so-called biggest democracy on the earth. When India had no other option, they planned a vicious, inhuman, and destroyous plan under the fascist Modi and his companion Amit Shah and Ajit Doval to break the will of Kashmiris. What is the will? The will is only the will for plebiscite, the demand for plebiscite, the will of freedom from the Indian occupation, from the Indian illegal occupation, which they have occupied on the midnights of 26 and 27 October 1947. That plan was implemented on the 5th August, everyone know, which was in really, I always talked in House of Commons, in UK, in other platforms, that this was not only the curfew, this was not a communication breakdown. Uzma, this was really the economic and financial breakdown of Jammu and Kashmir. Hence, economy of Kashmir suffered more than, this is the statement of which I am sharing with all friends, all sisters and brothers. This is the statement of Chairman of Chamber of Commerce of Srinagar, Indian occupied Kashmir. We have suffered, we have lost more than $20 billion so far till this time in this COVID-19 since 5th August 2019. Small and large business were hit hard. Trade, tourism, handicraft and fruit industry, especially saffron industry, handicraft industry was main source of income for 85% people was destroyed deliberately. Everyone know the voice of Kashmiris, the journalists tortured, booked under lawless law, children made to see their loved one being butchered, houses demolished during fake catch and search operations by the Indian forces. If pain had physical existence, then that would have been seen in Kashmir. During the COVID-19, it would have been difficult to raise the voice of besieged people of Kashmir if it was not for the webinars and virtual conferences. These webinars were the reason Kashmir cause is not faded. It is here, and we will keep on struggling on every avenue till the freedom. On behalf of the besieged people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, I would like to appeal to the world conscious UK, P5 members, United Nations, and Western democratic countries to intervene and help to resolve the Kashmir long pending 73-year long pending Kashmir issue as per the resolutions and international law, and save the South Asia region from a bloody war. Dear friends of Kashmiris, we the Kashmiris are not asking, this is from my core of heart, we are not asking Uzma, Philip Benion, we are not asking for any new thing. We are just asking for the implementation of the resolutions of United Nations which have been agreed by the India, Pakistan. We are asking for the only implementation. We are asking for the plebiscite as per those resolutions, and we are asking for the commitment of then Prime Minister of India, Mr. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, who announced in Srinagar that Kashmiris will be asked for their future. We are asking for that commitments. At the end, time is very short. At the end, being the first-hand victim, as Uzma Rasool introduced me, I have lost my more than 20 family members, including my elder brother, my sister-in-law, my nephew, niece, more than 20 family members in this precious freedom struggle have been killed by the Indian forces, Indian agencies time and again. I, being the member of a divided Kashmiri families, 25 million Kashmiris are living around the world, in Srinagar, in Azad Kashmir, in Pakistan, in UK, in America. I would like to share the pain of the divided families. I would like to appeal United Nations again, P5, friends of besieged Kashmiris just like you, please come forward and ask India for the plebiscite of state of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh and end the continuous genocide of peaceful Kashmiris. We all Kashmiris are peaceful. We have
Mr.
been.
Bhat, I'm so sorry, I have to interrupt you there. It's just because we have time constraints, and His Excellency would like to have closing remarks too. You've given a very passionate speech and you've been directly affected by it. There's about 2.5 million in total, diaspora-wise. But thank you so much for your contribution, and hopefully we'll hear from you next time. If anyone does want to, from our MPs, would like to talk to Altaf Ahmed but further, document his experiences more, please feel free to contact him. He's someone who's done great work for Kashmir as he's kind of experienced it himself. Now I'd like to go on, before I go on to His Excellency the President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, I'm just going to bring in Councillor Hanif Raja. Councillor Hanif Raja is from Scotland, so we've got a Scottish person now, which is nice. And he works with Tehreek-e-Kashmir in Scotland as well, and he does a lot of campaigning. So, Councillor Hanif Raja, if you could join us. And thank you very much, Altaf Ahmed, but sorry for having to cut you off there.
Thank you, Uzma. Thank you, Fahim Kayani. Thank you yourself. His Excellency, excellent word that Excellencies always do and express his opinion. Could I just thank Andrew, if he's there, still there. He's doing a great job, and my request to the Tory parliamentarian group, this is an excellent start, started by Andrew itself, who has arranged a meeting with Keir Starmer last week, a week ago, and that is excellent outcome. And I would request the Tory parliamentary Kashmir committee to have a meeting with the Boris Johnson as well, and all the other parties who have established Kashmir for either Tory or for SNP or Liberal Democrat, they should also have a meeting with their leaders and express the concern the Kashmiri diaspora is facing. And I think this is a stage now where we as a Labour Party has taken this very seriously in leadership of Andrew and with other my colleague, a Labour friend for Kashmir. We had a meeting with Sir Keir Starmer and Lisa Nandi, who is a foreign spokesperson. And I think that has been, the came out was excellent. We explained what the issue with the Kashmiris and what is Kashmir is going through, because some of the people are not aware of the Kashmir issues going through. The Kashmiris are suffering for last 73 years. And one of my friends was saying, comparing China with India, it's not China. India claimed to be the largest democracy in the world. If this is a democracy, what is the people with the Chinas and Russia? And this is not democracy. And I think the world has to have a wake up and see what India is doing. Killing innocent people, no food for last 1 year. Can you imagine in Britain, someone locked down and in siege for 1 week? The whole world will be crying. And these poor people have been under siege for over a year, since 5th of August 2019 till today. And they don't have a freedom. Nobody raises a voice. Where is the United Nations? So these are the issues that we should highlight in front of our leadership who run this country, like Boris Johnson, Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland, Wales, First Minister of Wales, and also Ireland. And I think we are forgetting that Ireland has been going through with this as well. They need to be given a wake-up call for human rights. And human rights are very valuable issue just now, and we should raise that with our leadership. It's very well saying to the parties, over member of parliament, they time to time they raise the issues, and I thank all the parliamentarians, irrespective of which party they belong to. They are doing a great job on a humanitarian basis, but they must give a wake-up call to their leaders. Thank you very much. I've taken a lot of time, Uzma. Thank you for taking me in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fahim Kayani, as well, for organizing
Thank you very
this.
much.
Thank you.
It's great to hear about the outcome of the meeting in terms of the Labour Party. I think we're seeing a lot of development, which is good. I'm hoping that this can happen across the board, like you said, in all the parties and in the different areas of the UK. So now I'm going to go on to, because it's getting quite late and the President has tirelessly been busy today pushing for the Kashmir cause. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, as always, an excellent ambassador. I'm going to go on to the President now so he can address some of the questions that our panelists had.
Thank you so much, Rasool, for very efficiently conducting this session. And I want to thank all MPs and other participants who have expressed their strong solidarity with the people of Jammu and Kashmir and underlined the need for moving towards a solution. A couple of questions were raised and I'd respond to them, but I'd be brief because the hour is late and everybody is tired and exhausted because I know that you, Mr. Fahim Kayani, has been leading demonstrations. So, but before I respond to these points, I would like to thank Mr. Benion for informing everybody that Liberal Democrats have also constituted a Friends of Kashmir group. So this is a very welcome and appreciated addition. Thank you so much for doing it. And in the same breath, I want to thank Conservative Friends of Kashmir group and the Labour Friends of Kashmir group for their diligence and for their efforts to raise awareness about the dire developments in Jammu and Kashmir and for seeking solutions. Now, one point was made by Mr. Marco Longhi, who said that we need to reach out to the opposition parties in India because all of them and the entire population of 1.3 billion people in India doesn't endorse the extremist agenda of Narendra Modi, the BJP and RSS, and this is true. In fact, we are handicapped because of the perceived hostility between the two nations, Pakistan and India. It is very difficult to reach out to the sympathizers and supporters of Kashmir in India. But I think that The United Kingdom parliamentarians could be a conduit for communication with all those groups in India, whether they are political parties or women's groups or human rights groups, which support Kashmir's right to self-determination and other human rights. They could be reached out, and so that would be a bridge between the UK parliamentarians and the parliamentarians in India, also civil society groups in the cause of Kashmir. Ms. Jess Phillips had mentioned reaching out to women's groups, including the Commission on the Status of Women, which remains active throughout the year, but it holds annual meetings in New York. Of course, this is a very good idea, and I'll contact Ms. Jess Phillips so that we can work on this agenda. Women are important. Women are important in conflict situations, and their voice at the international level is heard in the United Nations chambers and in squares and streets all around the world. There was a specific question asked by Mr. Stephen Timms, and his was too, that last year we were citing this figure of 900,000 troops in Jammu and Kashmir, the occupied part of Jammu and Kashmir. Has this number decreased? No, it remains the same. Before the invasion of the territory, the number of the troops deployed there was 700,000. These are 3 corps, and you have paramilitary troops and border security force and CRPF, which is this police force that they have, Central Reserve Police Force. So altogether their number was beefed up last year, and now it is 900,000. It has not been decreased. They're so afraid of the civilian population, unarmed civilian population, the non-combatant civilian populations, that they dare not decrease the number of these troops. Second, there was another question about communication blockade. That communication blockade continues in Kashmir. And in fact, the internet ban was extended only a week ago. So my last 2 points are that the international community, and by that I mean the developed world, all members of the United Nations, they should not sleepwalk into disastrous conflict in this region, because if there's a conflict which escalates to the nuclear level, it will have consequences for the entire globe. It could be a trigger for the Third World War. So we should not be complacent about it. Earlier today, I heard one of the participants from Washington saying that there was a fatigue, that America was tired of these conflict zones and America wanted to disengage because these turbulent spots have heavy costs for America in terms of blood and treasure. But I would say that if you've assumed world leadership by participating in the United Nations decision-making, or as one of the indispensable nations or the indispensable nations, the consequences could be very disastrous, because disengagement now could mean higher costs, because endorsement of India's unilateralism and exceptionalism would mean breakdown of the international rule of law and consequently our contemporary world order, which was cobbled up in the aftermath or during the Second World War. So I would appeal to everybody to not adopt a hands-off approach, get involved, and create the environment for a diplomatic environment for saving unarmed civilians in Kashmir, and for finding a solution that would be acceptable to the people of Jammu and Kashmir, Pakistan and India. Thank you so much.